Hey everybody, welcome to Building Gen, episode 27. Today our guest is Tamar Ben-Shachar, who's an engineering leader at Retool. We talk about many things, but most importantly, we talk about her story, how she turned the ship around, the really struggling team inside Retool. So let's get into it.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. I'm very excited as well. I'm a Jamf.dev user also, so I'm kind of excited to hear how you guys do.
Oh my God! Welcome!
You know, the thing that I'm always curious about, um, like when I was looking at your LinkedIn, of course, we already talked about work at Segment, Stripe, Retool, and there's a common theme here. Like when I've used these products, at least from me as an end user, I'm sure you will have a different perspective because you're in there. Um, all of these products, they have this like bar of like quality that like before anything goes out, it seems like very polished. Like you use it, you feel that as a user using these products. Um, like why is that? Like you have worked in these different companies. Like what's common across all of these places?
I mean, it's funny because, from the inside, I don't think that way. I think that they're all, like once you come in, you see the sausage is made, and I'm like, they're all terrible. But I think that to the point is maybe sort of what drew me to these companies, right? Like obviously they existed way before I joined. I will not take credit for their quality. Is the people, right, that they surround themselves with. And the big thing is not only like the people are really smart, it's the people really care. They care about the product. And that's the thing that is similar, I think, across, right? Like people really believe in the product and they want it to be good. That they're there because they're like, this is really useful and I want to do my best work here. And then that's the motivation then behind it, right? Because then quality sort of is ingrained. It's not like, okay, you have to write 17 tests and you have to pass like this checklist. It's, well, I want this to be good because I want to be proud of it and I want this to be a better product because I'm here.
Mm,
Oh my
mm,
God, I love it. One of the things that we're trying to do as a startup is we're always trying to find our words, right? Like, how do we talk about how we build things at Jam? And every company talks about like, what does ready mean to ship to prod? And I'm curious if on your teams there are things that you use to talk about quality.
Yeah, I think the biggest change I think with my own teams that I made when I came in was what does done mean, which is like I think the same thing. Like I called it done done done, because I think there was I think with a thing like Retool, it's not continuous development. It's we deploy twice a week for a cloud and then every 2 weeks for on prem. And so given this like cycle, right? Like what is it's really easy to say, okay, well it's code complete, and in 6 weeks it'll go out to everybody, right? Like between feature flags and the roller cadence. And you're like, okay, well then this feature's not done. It's not done until it really hits that end, right? Like both you don't know that the metrics work. Um, you don't know that like we're capturing what actually we set out to capture. Maybe there's bugs that we haven't found, right? Like how you really like done, and then you can move on. And I think this is really important because when we say that we're done early before it's really deployed, we move on to the next thing, the shiny new thing that we're really excited about now. The other thing is like in our minds done. It's uh, it's so like like whatever last quarter. Uh, we don't actually spend the time then to do that last 20% to really then make it really high quality, right? Because you already moved on. It's like, okay, there's like some bug here, I'll like quickly like patch it up and I'll move on. And so by saying like things are done, 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 and that's when we move on. Now you're like, okay, like we really need to sort of focus on this, make sure that everything is really wrapped up, with a nice pretty bow, and then we can move our focus. And so yeah, like maybe sometimes within that, that's when you're doing the design docs, right? Like, but you're not actually really shifting to the next project. You just start to think about it. Versus before, it was really all about, okay, cool, like it's code complete. We're completely moving on to the next thing. Half the time we forget the feature flag is only like 20% rolled out because it's like no longer like exciting, you know? And so, yeah, so part of that again is like, is sort of the way that you think about it. And I think that also just changes then like how you're prioritizing what you're prioritizing.
Tamar, I'm
We
curious.
have
Oh,
talked about this in like previous episodes, and I'm always curious about because different people have like different answers around this. But in your like team, when you say like done, 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 and that last 20%, practically what does that mean? Like what are the tangible things y'all do as a team to hit that last 20%?
Yeah,
I love
I
this
mean,
question.
yeah. So bug busters are really big. So what we do, like kind of like as a process of execution, is demos, which I really like, especially like Retool being very customer facing. Uh, but essentially with my team's size, like we're building back-end products that are user facing, which is kind of unique to most things that are full stack that tend to be a little bit more front end heavy. And so then it's saying, well, how do you get kind of back end people to really think about the UX, or maybe they care about it less also, right? Like that's not their forte. They're trying to like do as little front end as possible. And what I find is like it's very easy to miss things in the UX. You're missing how actually people use a product, both because where we sit, we're not necessarily building retail apps all the time. We're using them, we're not necessarily building them. And two, like this is not the forte of the majority of the people on team. And so demos sort of like, forcing function to, okay, well, like holistically, right? What does it actually look like? You see it, show it to everyone. They're like, oh, have you thought about this? What about this part of it, right? And so that builds it up. And then you have these bug bashes. And the bug bashes are fun in a couple ways. It's first saying, okay, what are the scenarios that this goes through, right? And like we have everyone kind of like pick parts and walk through them. The other then is saying, well, what are the other parts within Retool that also leverage this, right? And this is interesting because like Retool has really proliferated the feature set. And one problem that we have now is saying, well, the whole point of Retool is to make it easy, but now there's so many features. How do you find out that they exist and make them easy to use? And so that's kind of the other part, right? It's like, okay, well, like probably the golden path works, but what about, okay, this like hidden feature over here? Have we thought about that, right? And so for us, these are things like spaces, like source control that are somewhat new. The team isn't necessarily familiar with those, right? So like, does that integrate with those parts? And is that important to launch? And that's kind of like, I think, where we kind of a lot of times find issues with, those like things, call them kind of side quests, where they are affected, right? They're necessary for the high quality product, but they aren't necessarily core to the new thing that you're adding. But they need that to work, and that's I think kind of a way to capture that.
Whenever things like that come up at Jam, there's a part of us that gets nervous. We're like, oh no, now this is where the scope creep happens, right? Like, how do you sort of time box, or how do you think about velocity versus, oh, but it's not that discoverable. We didn't think about this one UX. Like, how do you think about that?
Yeah, so usually, I think it's sort of what's the value of this thing that you're building, right? What's the time frame and what's next? And then saying, okay, well, you find these new things. How important are them to the core, right? And then what are you not doing to add to that, right? And so sometimes, we're doing a big push now to GA, like retail storage. And things like Azure support some actually UX features we pushed out. And for this, we said, okay, well, like we can't go over the quarter because we have another kind of important thing we're doing. And so that's the cutoff. And so we have a long list of UX features that we want to have. But we kind of listed saying these are the ones that are critical, right? These are the ones that like without them, it's not a GA. It's like a little bit better than it is today. The rest are like the nice to haves. And like ideally in a perfect world, we'd have them, but the opportunity cost is just not there if it's outside this time frame. And that's, I think, where like milestones are really important, right? Of saying like, it's important, like saying, okay, well, like we chose these because we think that the time versus value is there. And if that changes over time, right? You're saying, oh, actually, this became a lot more complicated than I initially thought because of whatever reasons. So if you find something that's a week, and then all of a sudden it'll be like, oh, this actually will take a month. Maybe it's not useful to do that anymore, right? That opportunity cost of the month is not useful. So I think what's important then is to like reevaluate, right, over time to make sure like you're really saying like a lot of times what's the core is what people really like, and the things around it, like you want to have that wow, but so do you have enough to have that wow? And then like sometimes if there's rough edges around it, like people, if you have that wow, people just don't really notice, don't care. And there's always people that notice, but like the majority of people, they don't necessarily care.
You have to have that wow is so good. Okay, listening to you say this really resonates. We've I think we make this mistake. So like we finish a project, we're like, woohoo, it's done, and then we move on. But like you said, it's not really done because on the day that we ship it, that's when the usage starts. And suddenly we start learning a ton. And so we're not done. Like it's almost kind of just begun. And so but we're very keen to like move on to other things. And so I'm thinking about there's this one feature in particular that we're like, oh, this is a quick win. Let's build folders into our product. And so we built folders and then we shipped it and moved on. And as soon as we started using folders, we just realized there are like so many things we wanted, but we'd sort of already moved on because we sort of misinterpreted what does done mean. And and we thought like, okay, one day we'll come back. Now we know more about folders, but it's been a year. We've never come back to folders because we're on to other things. And it's like, if we had just spent 3 more weeks or 2 more weeks right after folders shipped, like it would be better to use folders in Jam than it is today instead of us having to make a new project out of it. So anyway, hearing you say this, I'm like, oh, that's exactly the mistake that I've seen us make.
Well, I mean, it's hard too, right? Like, and so sometimes, like, with even with storage, right? So I mentioned we cut Azure, we added GCS. We added GCS even though it wasn't an ask because we knew that as part of GA, you need to support more than one file, like provider type, right? So S3 was the first one. And so while we additionally wanted O3, we're like, okay, well, like two is enough, right? Like two sets, okay, like now it's kind of globally available to the majority of our customers, not quite 100, but like close enough. Azure is like are by far like fewest usage. And so and we were like, okay, well, if we only do S3 because that's really what people are using right now, the grand majority, then we'll have to do, we know we'll have to do GCS at some point, right? Probably within the next 6 months, and then having to like restart and then do it is just like not going to be worth it when like GCS is like 2 weeks if we do it now.
Mhm.
And so let's just like really kind of just push it out, like, and we did this before some of the usability like nice to haves. Then you kind of get it. And then Azure was the one that was like, yes, like we would want to have this, but it's also a bigger ask because we have like very little support for Azure in our product. And then the usage of it is less. So like we're like, that can come. Like people can ask for it, and we'll do that maybe eventually, maybe not, and we don't care as much. But yeah, it's hard, right? Like there's never, when you look at it like 6 months later, a lot of things are more clear then, and it's too late.
How would you know, right? Like we're talking about a feature like folders, right? Which is like awesome to have, but it's like a smaller feature. It's not like a huge launch or anything. And so like how would you advise us to like know or beforehand? Like before anybody uses it, we're not gonna do early access, right? Like for folders to get feedback. So like how do you even know it's not done until people use it?
Yeah. So maybe like actually this happened with us with Retool database, which is basically we provide everyone a database, and it only works on cloud, because we're like on prem. Like, what does it even do? Like, you have to connect your own database. We just added ICUI on top. Like, it doesn't do much. But everyone wants to use it on prem, and we're like, nah, it's just you. Like, you're being weird. Like, and it took us about a year, and we're finally doing it now. And it's like the same thing. I mean, this one is said to be bigger, but it's like, yeah, we just like really didn't buy that use case.
So
and we were
funny.
wrong. And so it took enough big customers to be like, please, if we want to use this, just like give us a little help here. And we're like, okay, yeah, we should.
Yeah.
And so this is, I think, maybe like you need to have a way to like track, right, like what people really care about. And so you capture those things that like you don't think are a big deal, but maybe. So like one part of my team that we own is all the connectors. So we have 60 plus different ways to connect. And a big part of that is saying, well, how do we kind of keep this in maintenance mode, right? Like there's like a million things that you could add to them, right, to make them more useful, to reduce friction, like even things like updating SDKs, right, when they get behind. And how do you even know which ones like people really care about or not? And kind of before I joined the team, the answer was you wait until you get a high priority ask from a customer, and then you do it. Obviously, no one likes that. Sales don't like that. Engineers don't like that. You really can't make progress on the roadmap.
Tell me about it. This is my life right now. Continue.
We relate.
So one of the first things that we do is we call it the quality bar dashboard. So we have like for each integration categories, and these are kind of automatic. It's number of feature requests, number of bug requests, the number of bugs filed, things like number of errors over like some period, documentation, testing percentages, usage of customers, ARR of customers, and then we basically have bars depending on tiers, and the tiers are basically by usage. So the ones that have like tier 1, I think have over 20% of usage. Tier 2, I think over 10%, etc. And then you have to have a certain score over tier. And so then what we do is just once a week we look at this dashboard. Is anything under the threshold? And if it is, we look at that. And then what's great is like because there's categories, we can say, oh, like the number of bugs increased. And then we look at that, right, and say, okay, like let's do something about it. And that kind of helps us switch from this reactive mode to proactive, because we can see it slipping and then decide what to do with it. And the other weird thing is we can see like if is like all the errors go up, right? Like, oh, do we see like an increase in volume of bugs like across integrations, right? That's not just one, which is like a signal of a bigger problem, right? Than like Firebase is out of date. And that has really been like important to like sort of be able to shift the team to this proactive mode where we can really kind of focus on strategy, not worry about these things that may come up, because we kind of have a good handle on them.
Can I go back a little bit? I love this tangible advice that you shared earlier about like hitting that last 20% where, okay, like using the demos as a forcing function. Like that's great. Like when your team is humming, it's operating at like great cadence and all of that. But how do you make sure you hire the right people who will actually follow, like who will believe in that culture and be part of it? Like how do you weed those people out during interviews?
Yeah. So the main thing I really look for is motivation. Like I really don't care what people, the technologies they've used or not used, or just like companies that they've been in or not. What I really care about is like, why do you want to join? And are you curious? And basically, it's like curiosity and ownership are the two traits that I look for. And to me, it means like it's two ways. One is like you hire smart people, right? So you can do the best work. I'm not here to like micromanage and like tell you how you should do it, right? Like the whole point is like you should make the team better, right? And a lot of the team should be proactive and come from the team, especially with these things like developer products like Retool is, right? Like if everything came from top down, product wouldn't be like it is today, right? It is like it is today because a lot of it is driven by the engineering teams. And what we do today is not necessarily what we're going to do tomorrow, right? So like, are you really motivated by having really big impact and about wanting the product to be successful and hungry to see like I just want to kind of like go in and find out. And so like for example, like the last one of the last people I hired, like he has a mentality where he's like, look, I just want to like really sort of dig into how to make it regional successful. I'm like, wait, like with that, like, I don't really care what background you have, right? If you have that kind of motivation, you can take it. And then the other part that really like sold it for me was like, I had such great mentors in my past. I want to be that for someone else. And I'm like, sold. Like, you don't tell me anything else. Like like that I'm sold. And I think
That's
it's
a
like,
pretty good answer.
it's a great answer, right? It's like, should we steal
That's
it?
a good answer.
Yeah, for the next ones.
Yeah.
But I think like that was actually the first person I've ever had who said that specifically. But like that I think has made that successful, because then people focus on doing things for the team, both in terms of like there's always like the glue work, that is maybe not as glamorous, right? But again, like you need to do it to like function. And people who care about like the team and the impact over like individuals or the individual self or even like individual technologies, have no problem with that, right? Like that doesn't bum them out. And I think that's the other big thing, right? Like personality matters, right? So like if all you care about is technology, all you care is yourself, and you're like, this is not technically interesting, I don't want to do it, right? Like, no, it's hard to be on a team like that, especially when you're in a startup, right? And like sometimes these, like for example, the storage project, the core of it is a wrapper around S3. It's not necessarily the most glorious technical achievement ever, but to users it is. And so are you motivated by that, or are you motivated by like, I solved something that no one else in the world has done? And if you're the latter, then like there's definitely a great place for you. It's probably like a Google, but it's not a Retool. Not right now.
Do you have favorite interview questions that you're just like, as soon as I started asking this question, it became a lot easier to tell the important things?
I always ask them what their perfect job rec is. Right? Because then it's like, what are you really looking for? What do you describe what you're looking for? And so sometimes they'll talk about technologies, and then I'm like, oh. Sometimes I'm like, no, don't. Sometimes,
like, oh no, technology in an engineering interview.
I know, right? Well, I mean, I have a friend who is a very good friend, but not a good colleague, and he would only work in Java. He refused to touch Python, and it's very frustrating to work with them. And like just refused, like flat out refused. And honestly, like they were amazing at Java. And sure, like yes, the skill sets would be better used, but at some point it's a startup. You just gotta get some stuff down. Like we don't really have time to care about. It. We also don't have time to care. Like he cared so much about quality. I'm like, it doesn't matter enough because we don't even know the company's gonna be here in a year. So like we don't have to scale for 10x because if we do that, we're not gonna get there. Anyways, he moved to Google, which is a perfect fit for him.
I was just gonna say that is a very Google thing
Yeah,
to say. Yeah.
and it's great. He's been there ever since, many years now. And so like you need those kinds of people. I'm not trying to shit on those kinds of people, but I think like for these companies and for the teams that are like very high growth and very scrappy, like it's just not the right fit.
I'm reminded of in the very earliest days of Jam when Irtefa and I were looking for our first engineering hire, we interviewed more than a handful of candidates who would only join if we fully migrated the code base to Reason ML.
Yeah. Oh, there was Reason ML. Then there was this other like React framework as well. I forgot.
Svelte.
Yeah. Svelte. Yeah. We were gonna get slaughtered at that moment. But yeah, like a
I've
lot
never
of
heard of
those
either of
people.
those, to be honest. I thought you were
We
going to
had
say
never
Rust.
heard of
Rust is all the rage. What are your go-to
Oh.
questions for hiring?
Oh, we added one recently that has been so helpful. So it's a little spicy, but we ask we ask a lot of positive things too. But one that we ask that's been very clarifying is, hey, in the past when you've worked for a manager and you haven't like quite gotten along, like what is it usually about? Because it tells you so much about like what's a bad situation for this person. Because if they say like if they say something that is the case at our company, they are going to have that experience. And we always share like I'll always share like and vice versa. Like usually if I'm struggling with someone, it's always about for me it's always about quality. So it's like we have different levels of quality bar. We're just like constantly talking about it. But that one's been a big telling one.
I like it. Maybe I'll steal it.
Okay, I'm dying to know something. I was reading your LinkedIn before, and Tamar, it sounds like when you joined your current team on Retool, you joined like the challenge team. It was like there was incidents every day. Like it was like when we think about engineering, we think about building something new, but you were in course correct mode. I wanted to like hear the story, hear how you did it.
Yes, so it was called Connect, which was a very apt name at the time. And it was really only about can you connect data and to the company. And they had no manager for a while. They had a previous manager who was a first-time manager. I think I got no support. This is kind of like sometimes in startups, like you change roles, but you get no support. And so whether you either like that or you don't, right? And this was when I got fit. So they were kind of without a strong manager for quite some time. And so what the team was doing was just like, responding to these high severity tickets. And the team was like pretty depressed because they were like, they didn't see a way out of it, right? They were like, my life will just be going to work in the morning, seeing what customers' issues are, doing them, and repeat. And you're like, that sounds horrible. No wonder you're depressed. One person on the team actually really liked it. He like got a dopamine rush every time, but no one else did. And that's right. This is actually where the first thing I did. And so it was interesting though, is like the team was actually very cohesive in their misery, which was very nice. Like they had lunch together every day. It was very sweet. But the big thing was like, okay, like why do you think that this is true? And there were a lot of reasons. And the big thing is, okay, well, like let's focus on the vision, right? And kind of getting on board with that. And everyone kind of like say, okay, well, like we sort of agree that like the team is not just here to make connections, right? Like the team here is here to like really have data being well leveraged in Retool. And so the motto that we say now is like data is better leveraged on Retool than it is without Retool. And that's kind of like our guiding light. And so it's really not, and like connecting is like a necessary but not sufficient, right? It's like that's shifting again, like that. So now it's called core data is the new name of the team, right? But it shifts like connect, right, which is really all about that first piece to then say, okay, well, like that's yes, it's a part of it, but it's the very beginning. And then people are like, yeah, the vision sounds great, but like we're not going to get there. We're going to be stuck in a little trap, of like these tickets. And this is where the quality bar came in. And I was like, look, the problem is we have no observability into what's going on. So like, of course we're going to like, there's always fires because we don't know that it's actually simmering for months and we just done nothing about it because we have no idea until it's a fire. And people were like, quality bar is stupid. Like it's gonna, there's no way to like get real measurements. It's all gonna be manual. It won't actually tell us anything. And I was like, look, I know I'm new, but like, give me this one thing. See, it doesn't like takes like 2 weeks to build. Come on, and doesn't work. We won't use it. But like,
Oh my god.
let's just see what's possible. And then all of a sudden, like,
I'm
oh,
getting
actually,
chills.
like,
I'm getting chills from listening to this. This is like the start of a movie. Yeah, go ahead.
New boss coming in, like trust me, everyone. Like,
everyone's like, oh, who is this person? Hate them already. We're making all these high promises. We're not getting anywhere. We got this one guy who's a really team player, so he's like, I'll do it. It's like, thank you. And he's like, oh, actually, like a lot of things can be automated. And I'm like, interesting. And anyway, it worked, and that kind of like really switched the team, and it was funny because we had yesterday actually they had like Q4 planning with like this whatever the staff team, and we invited like sales and marketing for the first time, and they asked a question about like usage of like Retool database, because that's basically our big push for next quarter, and I was like, oh yeah, like here's the like I was like, I don't remember the percentage off the top of my head, let me go check, and so I check on this dashboard. And they're like, how are you finding this out? I'm like, so I show them this link, and they're like, do we always have this? I'm like, we've had this for some time now. But it was fun, like, to see them, because like, for them, they're not looking at like the all the individual pieces, right? They're looking at like the ARR and query share, and how does that kind of play out, right? It's like what our investments are. And again, right, it's just like you need visibility, and the same thing, right? Like the folders example, right? Like you don't know it's successful until you ship it. But if you had no metrics around it, you still wouldn't have known, right? And so like you need that as a like starting point to even, think about getting out of where you are.
Wait, then what happens? So you have the visibility, and but you're still fighting the fires. How do you get from firefighting mode to this like, the state of the world today?
Yeah. So the big part of it was like, do we trust this data? Because I think that's what the team was really like unsure about, right? They were really pushing back on. They were like, it's going to say something. It's probably going to be completely useless. It won't be like grounded in reality. And the team was like, okay, well, what do you think is bad today? And they were like, Firebase. And so we put these scores up, and like Firebase actually wasn't bad. And so it's like, okay, well, like let's dig into it and say like, why isn't Firebase bad? Because you said it was bad. Anyways, it turned out actually that Firebase was fine. It just had no documentation, and so no one knew how to connect to it. And that was interesting. And so then they were like, oh, interesting. Like maybe I found something.
Wow.
So that really started to get people like a little bit more interested. And then there was another one that we found out that was bad. I forget which one it was now. And digging into it, it actually was really bad. And we had no idea. And so actually like that, we then worked on that afterwards, immediately. And so, I think there was maybe like one more that was slightly off. Anyway, so then we got all of them up like on like to above our thresholds. And then we started saying like actually these things came in like less and less. And the other part was like with this, it allowed you the team to feel better about saying no. Like that was another piece of it, right? Like even if things come in, you have to say no to things, and like no engineer likes to say no. And so this is where like I feel like it's my strength. I'm happy to say no. But sometimes, and I think that you need to know in two ways. I think one thing our industry does really badly is they say dump it in the backlog, and sometimes it's like, look, I'm not going to do this ever. Like unless something completely changes, it's not happening. And I'm happy to just tell you that now, and then you're free to push back and tell me why I'm wrong, and then maybe we can change our minds. But I don't like to like just dump in the backlog and we'll get to it eventually when I know that we won't. Kind of a feeling. So I have like I auto close tickets that have been there more than some amount of months as like won't fix, and then it's like explicit. You can push back on it, which I love. But I don't like this pretending game. And so the other piece was then saying, okay, well, like this is why this is like a low tier, right? Like look at the career percentage. It's like less than 1%. It's not worth our time. And then it was really clear to everyone like why we're not going to prioritize this. And then it also sort of unlocked another piece of saying like actually you can say no, and you also can like help sales to understand like what is worth working on or not from our perspective, and why making those determinations, and they can obviously look at it themselves and say, oh, no one actually cares about this. So unless there's like a really high paying customer, it's just not going to be, it doesn't sort of make sense. And so that was the other, I think, missing piece. And that's really like, I mean, it didn't happen. I think it took, I don't know, maybe a quarter or so to shift. Um, and it was funny, like, yeah, so yesterday, right? So after this review, so my tech lead was also there, and he pings me. He's like, I guess the quality bar has been quite useful. Like, I know I gave you some pushback in the beginning. And I'm like, yes. Yes, you did.
This is really inspiring to hear right now in this moment because we're in a bit of this moment. Last month, without nothing changed on the jam surface, but underneath, we had to rip out the old thing and put in a new thing because Chrome updated their set of APIs. So we had to like do a total refactor of our app. And so it's been live, which is great. But now we're in the whack-a-mole phase of this thing has been live. And so we're like every customer issue, we're like, okay, let's figure out, did we break something? What did we break? And so we're in this sort of very reactive mode where it's exactly what you're describing. Every day, engineers come in, they look at what issues have been reported, and then they get to work on solving them. And it's just like, that's the cadence every day. And we're like maybe 4 weeks into that mode. And it's like, it gets exhausting on week 2. And we're just at the point where it's like, okay, we think we're sort of like getting out of the woods, and now it's time to build our quality bar. And so today at stand up, the engineers did like a presentation about the tooling that they're building to sort of automate a lot of this and surface a lot of this. It's hard when you're in that moment of like whack-a-mole to imagine that you're going to get past it, but we're in that moment right now, and we're trying to get past it by building these sort of dashboards and tooling. And to hear you say that, and to hear that it took a quarter, like it's like actually very, very nice to hear.
Yeah, no, I know. I'm very happy. Yeah, I mean, it's sometimes amazing what like a small change can do, right? And it's like it seems like, oh, like observability, is that really going to solve a problem? Like it's not going to fix anything, but it does. And so yeah, you gotta you call to your ground, and the lights there, lights there.
So, Tamar, when you came into that team, like clearly you had this like confidence, like yeah, this is gonna take like 2 weeks, but I think doing this thing hopefully can get us closer to a place where we can get out of this mess. Uh, I'm curious, like, what happened before that? Like, how did you develop that intuition that hey, like this is a thing, this is what's wrong, and this is hopefully will give us some like visibility.
Yeah, I think it was. I think I did what everyone does when they come in. I just ask a million questions, and I see what people say is commonality and what's not. And it was very common. Like everyone was always on the same page, which was like honestly very shocking. Um, and I think what was funny is like with going to market, I actually heard a lot more excitement about what we could do with data than I heard within the team and within engineering. And and also like coming from like more of a data background, I'm like I don't understand like I was confused. Like actually, I didn't realize that the team only did the connections. I thought they would do more. And so kind of those things together, I think was like, okay, well, why aren't we focusing on that next piece? Go to market team super jazzed about it, and they keep talking about it, and keep talking about like that. Like again, like at some point, right? You have to, in a lot of these new companies, you have to build a bunch of integrations, right, to like even like be competitive. And so at some point, yes, like that's what the team sort of had to do, right? They had to build a bunch of connectors to kind of be competitive. And then at this point, right, it was already like the diminishing returns, right? You get to like the less than 0.01% of quarter share. And so you're like, building this is not, it's not worth the engineering time it takes, let alone the maintenance cost of like a single question being asked and someone having to debug. Unless you pay us a lot of money, right? And because it's a company, so at some point, right, like that changes. And I knew that we had to be in the rut, right? And so like while like of course like I wasn't positive it was going to work, I knew that it would be useful, right? And I knew that it would give a signal that we didn't have, and like maybe like then from there, right, it would have been a slightly different path. But we had to start somewhere, and we needed some kind of observability to even like have the conversation about can we get out of this hole. And I think it's sort of like taking kind of again I come from a data background, backend backgrounds. This is my full kind of like full stack team, and so I think sort of taking kind of like, of course, like anything backend, you always have observability. It's the first thing that you do. And I think it's just like not something that like on a full stack team is maybe the first thing that you do, right? You build like UX, you build products. And so kind of taking that mantra and saying, okay, well, like what does that mean in this world? And so to me, like, that meant this quality bar. It was like kind of the closest to that. So I think that was kind of like the I think that's to me, like, that's a big part of my own kind of learning is like shipping sometimes you get to run products, which is kind of like what I'm doing now is very different than kind of the back end of the house where I historically done.
No, I was just gonna say like the big takeaway is this, like how like this kind of different background from transitioning from a back-end team
Ooh,
to like a full
yeah.
stack team help you bring in that philosophy that actually helped get the full stack team out of this rut, like which is pretty incredible.
I
Well, so
love
this is
that.
something that I'm curious kind of what your take is on, right? I think like as an industry, we hire usually like we like or what do careers do, right? They look for profiles that are similar to what the team does. But then we also like on the same like vein, we also talk about diversity, right? A diversity of background, diversity of this, but we only hire for the same profile. And at some point, with the same companies, you do the same kind of stack, you all think the same. It doesn't sort of matter where you kind of come from. And I don't really think that like full stack is that it's different, right? Like it's a different problem space, but it's not that like you're incapable of doing that and vice versa, right? Like it's not like someone who's only in a full stack teams can't manage a backend team. There'll be different challenges, like you have to learn new things. But um I don't know why we like to like keep ourselves in our own little boxes sometimes.
Yeah, it's a hard choice, like especially like a company like ours of this size going through this, like we're like scaling up, we're growing as a company, but we're still trying to have the same philosophy of like hiring, oh, like this fit works really well with what we want to accomplish, so we're going to keep hiring those people. um, I think we need some sort of observability there to make sure that we hire for other kind of background as well.
It's hard, right? Because you only have like I only have 3 headcount this year. Who are gonna hire, right? The sure bet or like um the one that can either like really kind of switch and change what we're gonna do, change the trajectory because they have completely different opinions, but it could go horribly wrong.
You
And
know, it's oh sorry.
oh, no, go
Got
ahead,
too
go ahead.
excited. I was just thinking, okay, so there's right now there's this like team of two engineers that are building a new product at Jam, and I was just using it for the first time on staging yesterday, and I got all excited, and it's like it was very exciting, as you were saying that, I was just thinking about like why they make such a good duo. It's because they have very very different engineering experiences before Jam. One built Microsoft Teams. I mean, like within the team that built Microsoft Teams, and one is like the first engineer at every startup, right? And so one is like the wild west of engineering, like YOLO, what's possible? And one's like, but like, I'll add some tooling here, you know? And so
Right.
actually when they come together, those like very, very different backgrounds, they do really amazing things. And so anyway, as you were saying that, I was just thinking about this kind of specific example and maybe that why that's working so well.
No, I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like to. I think it's important, right, to expand sort of what diversity means into also like technical backgrounds in companies. And that way you can say like
Retool is
if you
like
hire everyone from Stripe, everyone's going to then think the same way because we've been kind of ingrained, right, to think about this the Stripe way, and that's just not always the best, right? Like there are other ways that work in different circumstances, um, and it's also I think like a lot of times like management is fun because people are interesting and people are deterministic and you don't kind of know what you're going to get. And so, throw very different people together and you see, I mean, it doesn't always work, but like Chaos Monkey, right? Like, could have that spark.
As we wrap, I wonder if there are. So I love done, done, done. Um, I wonder if there are other things that you say that you hear yourself saying often or like repeating often to your team that you can leave us with as like a parcel of wisdom.
A partial of wisdom. Something that I'm also bad at, but I tell my team a lot is to boast about their work, right? And this is sort of like a pride
That's so
thing,
nice.
right? It's like, I think sometimes, again, this is also something that started from when I joined the team and they kind of were in a bad place, is they're like, well, the company never talks about us. It's like, well, you also don't tell the team what you're doing. And as it also gets larger, right? Like they don't always know, right? And so both it's again you do this done. You send we call them the shipped emails, so on from Stripe. Um, you know, you're not to the org. Like, this is the cool thing that I built, right? Like, this is how I move the needle. We also just started doing like little laptop stickers, right? So like design me like a cute little logo for big projects. So like we did a retail storage GA. Someone drew like a little like macho man with like a big muscle, says GA on it, and like a little, it's like a file guy. So it's like basically a files, but it's like a humanoid. You know, then you put the stickers on your laptop. Everyone has them. You feel pride about it, right? And to me, that's a big part, right? Like, you want to be proud about your team and proud about kind of where you are. And and I think sometimes like like within this is what I find out within junior engineers, right? Like, how do you shift from like a mentality of like you're in school and there's always like deadlines and goals to a place where like there's not any, right? Like maybe there's deadlines, but like that's the kind of like it's a very choose your own adventure, and to actually celebrate wins along the way. And so like what can you really do to celebrate wins? And so that's presenting it to like a demo or an all hands, like tell everybody in the company what you did, to have stickers that people see that they can tell, that like you look at every day and you're like, yeah, that was really cool that I did that. And you can tell like, everyone sees it and they're like, oh, what's that? Like, oh, let me tell you, like all those different things. I think that's what, I think definitely my team is really bad at, that we're trying to shift. But I think like as an engineering culture, I think engineers tend to be really bad about that also. I think this is like not unique to Retool. I think it's just unique to like a lot of engineers that I think are like love to kind of shift.
Oh my god. I just can I even find it this fast? There's no way. I love this. We've done this like maybe twice. But the most iconic was back when we added like Stripe integration to our products. When we first launched Jam, it was like totally free. When we first added billing, all the engineers that worked on it. Well, we're a remote team, right? So stickers, no one on the team sees, but t-shirts, it was like Comic Sans. I help Jam make money.
That's awesome.
I love
They
it. I
really
love
liked it. That was a good touch.
It was fun.
Yeah, when I was at Mesosphere back in the day, they the design team was really into biking, and so they made like whatever the bike bibs and the shirts, and they had Mesosphere logo on them. And I thought at the time that it was silly, and it was like really because like it was like, well, you really like biking, so this is like self-serving. But like it was amazing, like biking through like the Bay Area, how many people like stopped them and were and talked about it, right? It's like same thing, right? It's like whether it's like internally or externally, like shirts or bike gear, people see it and they ask about it, and then it makes you feel good, like you're like, oh yeah, like this is kind of what I'm doing, and then I'm happy to come to work in the morning, right? Like in a weird psychology.
That's so cool. Tamar, this was awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it was super
Thank you for
fun
the great
to
stories.
chat with you all, to meet you all. Excited to see what you guys all strip. And I want to follow up to see how you're getting out of your little whack-a-mole hole.
Oh my gosh. Okay, we can't wait to share.
Share. You have to send me a
Follow-up
whack-a-mole.
episode.